I saw it happen in his shoulders first, my son's shoulders. We had been in the new country 11 weeks, and I had learned to read my boy from across a room because, in those weeks, he had stopped telling me when he was hurt. He was 7 years old, and he had decided, with the terrible, quiet logic of a child, that his pain was a thing he carried so I would not have to. So I watched his shoulders. And on the day of the lantern garden, standing at the edge of a courtyard full of laughing children under the high stone face of the palace, I watched my son's shoulders climb up toward his ears and lock there, and I knew that somewhere in that bright crowd he had just been left alone again. His name is Tomek. In our old tongue it is a soft name, a name you can sing. Here the children could not say it. They had tried, the first weeks, the way children try a strange word once and then drop it, and after that they did not call him anything at all, which is a worse thing than a wrong name. A child with no name in a crowd is a child no one is looking for. I should tell you how we came to be there at all in that courtyard on that day, because I have thought about it many times since, and I no longer believe it was an accident, though I cannot prove that and would not try. The palace held a children's day each summer, the Lantern Garden, open to the whole city and to those of us who had come from far away, and were not yet sure we were allowed to want anything. There were stalls of honey bread and paper windmills, a man who made animals out of folded reeds, a fiddler, and at the center of the great paved court a wide painted ring on the stones where in the late afternoon the children would play the old garden games, the circle dances, the choosing games, the games where you must take a partner by the hand. A teacher from Tomek's school had pressed a paper into my hand at the gate that week and said, kindly enough, that it would be good for him to mix, to make friends. She did not know, I think, what she was asking. She did not know that to mix, you must first be let into the mixture. I had nearly not gone. But Tomek had seen the paper, and he had looked at the little drawing of the lanterns on it, and he had said one word in his own tongue, very quietly, lanterns, and I had not the heart to say no to the first thing he had wanted in 11 weeks, so we went. We came early. He wore his good shirt, the one with the wooden buttons his grandmother had carved, and he had wetted his own hair down flat with his hands at the basin that morning without my telling him, because he wanted so badly to be a boy the other children would choose. You must understand that. He was not a sad child by nature. He was a child trying with everything in him to be chosen, and being, every day, not chosen. For the first hour it was almost well. There were the stalls and the reed animals and the fiddler, and these things do not require a partner. A thing you can stand near and watch does not break your heart. He held my hand and he pointed, and once he laughed out loud at the reed man's grasshopper, a real laugh, and I had to turn my face away so he would not see what it did to me to hear it. Then the bell rang for the games, and the painted ring filled, and my son let go of my hand and walked toward the other children, because the teacher had said make friends, and he was a boy who did as he was told. And I stood at the edge with the other mothers and I prayed in my own tongue, the way you pray when you already know. The first game was a circle, all hands joined turning. I watched him reach the ring. I watched him put out his hand to the boy on his left, a stout fair boy in a green cap, and I watched the boy in the green cap look at my son's hand the way you look at a thing that has come too near your food, and turn his shoulder and join hands instead with the child beyond, so that the circle closed and my son was on the outside of it. Not pushed, not struck, simply closed out the way water closes over a stone, leaving no mark to point to and say there that is the cruelty. There was no cruelty you could name. There was only a circle, turning, and my boy standing beside it with his hand still half raised, lowering it slowly, understanding. He did not cry. He had learned not to cry where they could see. He stepped back out of the ring and he came and stood near me again, not against me, a little apart, a boy pretending he had only wanted to watch, and his shoulders were up by his ears, and I put my hand on the back of his neck and felt how hot it was, and I said nothing, because there was nothing in any language that would not have made it worse. That is when I first noticed the guard. I had seen him before, of course, the way you see a statue, which is to say not at all. He stood at the foot of the broad steps that climbed to the palace doors, at the corner of the painted ring, a soldier in a scarlet coat and a tall black fur cap, white-gloved, perfectly still, his rifle held against his shoulder, his eyes fixed on nothing, on the middle distance, on whatever it is such men are trained to see that the rest of us cannot. The children ran almost under his boots, and he did not move. A small girl had hung a paper lantern on the railing by his elbow, and he did not look at it. He was the most still thing in a court full of motion, and I had taken him, like everyone, for furniture. A handsome piece of the day's decoration, a man-shaped part of the palace. But when my son's hand came down out of that turning circle, I happened to be looking past Tomek toward the steps, and I saw the guard's eyes move. It was nothing. It was the smallest thing. His head did not turn. His body did not shift by the width of a coin. But his eyes, those fixed soldier's eyes, came down off the middle distance for the space of one breath and rested on my son standing alone beside the closed circle, and then went back up to the nothing they were guarding. And if you had not been a mother watching her child the way I was watching mine, you would never have seen it at all. I almost did not believe I had seen it. I told myself I had imagined it. The day went on. The games went on, and each one was the same wound in a new shape. There was a game with a long rope, where the children must run in under the turning rope 2 at a time, holding hands. No one would be Tomek's 2. There was a game of chairs, where a child put out of his chair must find another, and somehow it was always my son's chair that was taken first and never my son who found another. And I saw a steward, a kind enough man, a man doing his job, gently steer Tomek out of the press of children so that the game could go on cleanly. Steer him out the way you would steer a chair out of a doorway, with no unkindness and no thought, and set him at the edge and forget him. There was a song, they all knew the song. It was a counting song in the local tongue, a song every child here had drunk in with their mother's milk, and they sang it with their whole bodies, stamping, and at a certain word they must all clap the hands of the child beside them. And my son did not know the song and had no child beside him to clap, and he stood at the edge mouthing shapes that were not the words, trying to look as if he were singing, his lips making the ghost of sounds he did not know, so that no one would see he did not belong. I have buried people I loved. I tell you the truth when I say that watching my child pretend to know a song so that strangers would not see he was alone took something out of me that those graves did not. Once the teacher tried, I will say that for her. She was a young woman, new to her work and not yet hardened to the 1,000 small cruelties that pass under a teacher's eyes every hour, and she saw my son standing out, and she did the well-meaning thing, the thing the books tell you to do. She took him by the hand and led him into the next game and set his hand in the hand of another child and said, brightly, loudly, so that everyone heard it, "There, now you have a partner, isn't that nice?" And every head turned. And the child whose hand she had put my son's hand into stood stiff and suffering, enduring it, counting the seconds until the teacher's back was turned. And the moment it was turned he dropped my son's hand as you drop a thing that is too hot, and wiped his palm on his trousers where my son could see, and went back to his friends. The teacher had made it worse. She had made my son a problem that had to be solved in public, a chore handed to an unwilling child, and there is no lonelier thing than to be someone's assigned kindness. I did not blame her. She had tried. But I learned, watching it, a hard truth about kindness, that kindness which announces itself, kindness performed for the watching room, kindness that makes the receiver into a case to be managed, is not kindness at all to the one who receives it. It is only one more way of being marked as the child who must be carried. Real kindness, I would learn before the day was out, looks like nothing of the sort. Real kindness looks like a man simply choosing you, the way you would choose anyone, as if there were nothing to solve. And through all of it the guard stood at the foot of the steps, scarlet and black and white, eyes on the middle distance, and did not move. I had begun by then to hate his stillness a little. It seemed to me the very picture of this whole bright, cruel country, handsome and well-ordered and serene, and looking always over the heads of the small and the foreign at some grand distance, while at its feet a child stood alone. I am ashamed of that thought now, but I will not pretend I did not have it. I had nearly gone to Tomek a dozen times by then. A mother's hands are the most useless thing in the world at such a moment, and the most desperate. I knew, I had known since the first week, that there was nothing I could do that would not deepen the wound. If I went and took his hand and drew him out, I would only be the teacher again, only larger. I would only confirm to the whole bright court what they already believed, that this was a child who had to be rescued by his mother because no one else would have him. The one gift I could not give my son was the gift of being wanted by someone who did not have to want him. That gift, by its nature, could not come from me. It could come only from a stranger. And strangers, I had learned in 11 weeks, do not give it. So I stood at the edge with my useless hands, and I waited for the day to end, and I prepared, as I had prepared every day, to take my brave, dry-eyed boy home and to hold him in the dark after he slept, where he could not see, and to do my own crying then. The afternoon tilted toward gold. The fiddler struck up, and the mothers were called by the steward to the long tables for the honey bread and the cordial, and the children were left to the great ring for the last and best of the games, the one they had all been waiting for, the lantern dance. I have learned its name since. The Fair Cross, they call it. It is the old partner dance of this country, the one the grandmothers know, danced at weddings and at midsummer, and every child here learns it before they can read. The children pair off, hand in hand, and form two long lines facing, and at the head of the lines a great paper lantern is lit and passed down between the rows from clasped hand to the music, and the pair who hold the lantern when the fiddle stops lead the next figure, and so on, the lantern traveling down the joined hands of all the children like a small flame walking on water. It is a beautiful thing. I had never seen it. I did not know then that you needed a partner for it, that it was a thing built entirely of taken hands, the cruelest possible game for the one child no one would take by the hand. The steward clapped and called the pairs, and the children flew into their twos as if magnetized, best friend to best friend, brother to sister, the fair boy in the green cap seizing two hands at once and laughing. And in less than a minute the whole court of children had sorted itself into the long facing lines, 200 small hands clasped and swinging, and there was one child left over. You know which child. He stood in the gap between the two long lines in the open lane down which the lantern would travel, the one place no child should stand, and he turned slowly all the way around, looking for a hand, any hand, one hand, and there was not one. The lines had closed. They were even now. He made them odd. He was the spare. The steward, busy with the lantern at the head of the lines, had not yet seen him. The fiddler had not yet begun. For a moment, a long, terrible public moment, my son stood alone in the bright lane between 200 joined children, with every eye in the court beginning slowly to find him there. The boy who had no partner, the boy left over, the child no one would stand with, and I saw his chin begin to go, the way it does just before the tears he had sworn he would not shed, and I dropped the cup of cordial a stranger had put in my hand, and I started forward to go to him, to take his hand myself. His mother, the last hand left in the world to him. And the guard moved. I want to tell this part exactly, because I have told it so many times since, to my husband, to my own mother on the long-distance line in our own tongue, to Tomek himself when he was old enough to want to know, and each time I have tried to keep it exactly true, because the truth of it is finer than anything I could invent. The guard came down off his post. I did not know then what that meant. I have learned since. I have learned that a soldier of that company does not leave his post, that it is the first law of him, older than orders, that he stands where he is set and does not stir, not for rain, not for mockery, not for a fainting woman, that men have stood those posts through abuse and through tedium and through their own grief without so much as turning a head, that the not moving is the whole of the discipline, and the discipline is the whole of the man. I have learned that what he did, he was not permitted to do. That it would be written up, that there would be a word for it, and the word would not be a kind one. He did not know any of that mattered, I think, in the moment, or he knew it perfectly and chose. I cannot say which, and I have stopped trying to choose between them, because the two have come to seem to me the same thing. He grounded his rifle. He set it upright against the stone newel at the foot of the steps with a small, precise care, the way you would set down a sleeping child, and he left it there, and he stepped out of the place where he had stood all afternoon like a part of the building, and he walked not fast, not slow, with the long even tread of a man who has marched 10,000 miles and will march 10,000 more, his boots ringing once, twice on the stone, into the sudden hush. Every face turning now toward the scarlet coat crossing the court, and he walked straight down the open lane between the two long lines of children to where my son stood alone, and he stopped in front of him, and he looked down at him. And then this man, this still and terrible and immaculate man, this soldier of the king who was not permitted to bend or to speak or to so much as see a child, went down. Not all the way to his knees. He went down on one knee, the slow, controlled descent of a man in heavy dress, the scarlet of his coat folding, the tall black cap coming down level now with my son's frightened face, so that for the first time all day someone in that court was looking at Tomek not over his head but straight into his eyes. He took off one white glove. He did it without hurry, finger by finger, and tucked it under the arm that still held the brace of his shoulder square, and he held out his bare hand to my son, a big hand, a soldier's hand, scarred across two knuckles, warm I am told. I was not yet near enough to feel it, palm up, open in the universal language that has no tongue and needs none, the language that is the same in my country and in this one and in every country there has ever been. This hand is for you. Take it. And he said one word, the only word he spoke in the whole of it. He did not say it in the local tongue. I do not know how he knew, I have never known, and he would never afterward say, but he said it in mine, in Tomek's. In the soft singing tongue of the country we had left, the tongue no one in that court could speak, the tongue my son had not heard from any mouth but mine in 11 weeks. He said Tomek's name. He said it correctly. He said it the soft way, the singing way, the way it is meant to be said, the way his own grandmother said it, and my son's whole face came apart. I was perhaps 10 steps away by then. I stopped where I was. I understood, in the way you understand a thing all at once and forever, that this was not mine to walk into. That a thing was happening to my son that I, his mother, could not give him, because the one thing he needed in that moment was to be wanted by someone who was not obliged to want him. A mother's hand is the hand that must take you. He had needed so badly all day, all his whole short, hard new life, a hand that did not have to. He put his small hand into the guard's bare one. The guard closed his fingers around it, gently, the way you would close your hand around something that had flown in at the window and might yet fly out, and he rose, drawing my son up with him, up out of the lane, up out of the place of the leftover child, and he turned the two of them, the tall scarlet soldier and the small boy in the good shirt with the wooden buttons, and he led Tomek by the hand to the head of the two long lines, to the very head, to the place of honor where the lantern is lit. And he stood there, holding my son's hand, and looked out at the court of staring children and waiting mothers, and he did not say anything at all, because he did not need to. He had said it with his knee and his glove and a child's name in a tongue no one knew. He had said, "This one. This one is mine to stand with. Will any of you stand with him too?" The court was utterly silent. The fiddler held his bow off the string. I think the whole day held its breath. And then the fair boy in the green cap, the very boy, the same boy who had turned his shoulder and closed the circle that morning, I would have known him among 1,000. The fair boy broke from his place in the line, his face red, his eyes down, and he came up the lane half running, and he stopped in front of my son, and he put out his hand, not to the guard, to Tomek. And he said something low that I could not hear, and Tomek looked up at the guard, who gave the smallest nod, the smallest grave permission, and Tomek let go of the soldier's hand and took the fair boy's hand instead. And the two of them, the foreign boy and the boy in the green cap, joined the head of the line together. It went through that court of children like a flame through dry grass. I cannot tell it any other way. A second child came, a small girl with ribbons, and took the place beside Tomek, and then there were 3 children pressing to be near him, to be the one who got to stand with the boy the king's own soldier had chosen, the boy who, an hour before, had been the boy no one would touch and was now, in the strange swift economy of children, the most wanted child in the court. And the steward, his eyes very bright, hurried to reform the lines around this new center, and the children resorted themselves laughing, fighting now not to be apart from my son but to be near him, and there were too many of them. There were children left over now at the foot of the lines who wanted in, and that is a problem a steward is glad to have. The guard stepped back. He stepped back out of the head of the line. Once my son's hand was safely in the fair boy's hand, and the girl with ribbons was at his other side, and the thing was done and could not be undone. And he turned, and he walked back down the lane the way he had come, the long even tread, scarlet and black, and the children's lines opened to let him through and closed again behind him. And he went to the foot of the steps and took up his glove and drew it back on finger by finger, and lifted his rifle off the newel where it had slept and brought it back against his shoulder, and he turned to face the middle distance, and he went still. By the time the fiddler's bow came down on the first note of the fair cross, the guard at the foot of the steps was a statue again, eyes forward, immovable, a part of the building, and you would never have known to look at him that he had moved at all. I looked at him for a long time. He did not look back. That was right. I understood that it was right. The lantern was lit at the head of the lines, where my son stood, and it was passed down between the joined hands of 200 children, clasped hand to clasped hand, my son's hand to the fair boy's to the next, the small flame walking on the water of all those taken hands, and it traveled the whole length of the court and back, and the children sang the counting song. And this time, this one time, at the word where you clap the hand of the child beside you. My son had a hand on either side to clap, and he did not know the words, but the fair boy in the green cap leaned in and sang them into his ear, loud and wrong and laughing, teaching him. And by the second time round my son was singing too, singing the local song, the strange, hard, beautiful song of this country, in his own small foreign accent at the top of his voice, with 200 children, his face wet, his face shining, his face the face of a boy who has, at last, after 11 weeks and a whole life, been chosen. I do not remember walking to the long tables. I was simply there among the other mothers, and they had seen, all of them, and they were not looking at me the way they had looked at me for 11 weeks, the careful pitying sideways look you give the foreign woman whose child does not fit. They were looking at me the way women look at one another when their children are playing well together, the ordinary look, the look I had wanted so badly I had not let myself know I wanted it. And one of them, a stranger, pressed a cup of cordial into my hand and said, in the local tongue, slow and kind so I would understand, "He has a good voice, your boy. Your boy." As if he were one of theirs, as if he belonged to the same we that all their boys belonged to. I had to set the cup down on the table. I could not have held it. There is more, and I will tell it, because the moment by the lantern was the most beautiful thing I have ever seen, but it was not the whole of it, and I have come to think the rest matters as much. When the games were done, and the lanterns were lit all down the court against the falling dark, and the children were drooping against their mothers, a man came to the foot of the steps where the guard stood. An older man in a plainer dark coat, with a hard, quiet face and the kind of bearing that other soldiers straighten up around. An officer of some sort. The sergeant of the guard, I learned later, the man whose work it is to see that the men keep their posts and that the posts are kept as they should be. I saw him come, and my stomach turned over because I knew, even a foreigner who has been in a country 11 weeks knows, that a soldier who leaves his post is a soldier who has done a wrong thing. And I thought with a kind of horror that my son's one perfect hour had cost this man something, that the kindness would be paid for, that even here, even in this, there would be a price and someone would make him pay it. I went toward them. I do not know what I meant to do. Beg, I suppose. I had begged before in the 11 weeks. I had got good at it. It is a skill the foreign learn fast. I would tell the hard-faced sergeant that it was my fault, that I had failed to keep my son out of the way, that the guard should not be punished for my child, that I got close enough to hear. They were not the words I had braced for. The sergeant was standing in front of the guard, close, the way one soldier stands before another, and he was looking at him with that hard, quiet face, and he said, low, not for the court to hear, but I was near enough now, "You left your post." And the guard said nothing. He stood, eyes forward, and said nothing because there was nothing to say. He had left his post, it was true. And the sergeant looked at him a moment longer, and then he did a thing I will remember as long as I remember the glove and the name. He turned his head slowly, and he looked down the court at the children and the lanterns, at my son among them with his face still shining, sitting now in a knot of new friends sharing out the last of the honey bread, the fair boy in the green cap on one side of him and the girl with ribbons on the other, the most ordinary thing in the world, a boy among his friends, and the sergeant looked at that for a while, and then he turned back to the guard, and the hard, quiet face had changed, only a little. Only at the corners, and he said, "A man stands his post so the kingdom can sleep sound and the small can play safe. That is what the post is for. That is the whole of what it is for." He let that sit a moment. There are nights the post takes the shape the orders foresaw, and a man stands still and does his duty by standing still. And there are nights, not many, a man may serve 30 years and meet but one, the post takes a shape the orders never thought to write down, and the duty is to know which night you are standing in. He paused. "You knew," he straightened. "It will be the easiest report I have ever written. Carry on." And he stepped back, and the guard said very quietly, the only other words I ever heard him speak, "Sergeant," in the way that means yes, and thank you, and I understand all at once, and the sergeant returned the smallest nod and walked off into the dusk, and the matter was closed. I have thought so often about what the sergeant said. The post is so the small can play safe. I had spent 11 weeks believing that the order and the discipline and the serene stone face of this country were the enemies of my small foreign son, the wall he could not get over. And here was the keeper of that discipline telling me, without knowing he told me, that the whole vast machine of it, the still men, the kept posts, the unbroken rules existed in the end for exactly one thing, so that a child could play safe, that the discipline was not the wall. The discipline was what stood between my child and everything that would have crushed him, if only someone disciplined enough would consent once to bend it for him. That a rule kept by a man who knows why he keeps it is a different thing entirely from a rule kept by a man who has forgotten. I want to tell you before I finish about the things that came after, because they are the proof that it took, that it was not just one shining hour that closed over and left no mark. The fair boy in the green cap is named. Well, I will not give his name, it is his to give. But he and my son became, that summer, inseparable the way only 7-year-old boys can be, and through him a dozen others, and Tomek learned the counting song properly, and 100 other songs, and the fair cross, and by the autumn he came home from school one day and told me in the local tongue that he had taught the new boy. There is always a new boy how to play the chasing game, because the new boy did not know it, and I asked him in our own tongue why he had bothered. And he looked at me as if I had asked something very strange, and he said, in the local tongue, because he was standing on his own, as if it were the most obvious thing in the world, as if there were no other possible thing to do with a child standing on his own than to go and stand with him. That night we walked home together through the warm dark, past the windows of houses where families I did not know sat at suppers I would never taste, and for the first time in 11 weeks, My son did not walk pressed against my side as if the street might take him. He walked a little ahead. He swung the paper windmill the reed man had given him. He was humming the counting song under his breath, getting the words wrong, not minding that he got them wrong. And at the corner where we turned for our 2 cold rooms, he stopped and looked up at me in the lamplight, and he said, in our own tongue, the old soft tongue, "Did you see, Mama? Did you see the soldier?" And I said that I had seen. And he was quiet a moment, working at something, the way a child works at a thing too big for him, and then he said, he knew my name. Not how did he know my name, not isn't it strange, none of the questions an adult would have asked. Just that the plain wonder of it, turned over in his hands like a stone he had found and meant to keep. He knew my name. As if a man knowing your name and saying it the right way, the singing way in front of everyone, were the rarest treasure the world had to give. Which, for a child who had gone 11 weeks without hearing his own name in any mouth but his mother's, perhaps it was. I told him yes, he knew your name. And my son nodded, satisfied, and took my hand, not because he needed it, I understood, but because he wanted it, which is a different and a better thing. And we walked the rest of the way home, and he slept that night without the small frightened sounds he had made in his sleep all those weeks, and I did not have to do my crying in the dark, or if I did, it was a different kind. He had it from the guard, I am certain of it. The guard taught my son, in 1 wordless minute on a summer evening, the only lesson that has ever truly stuck to him, which is that the standing with is the whole of it, that you go to the one no one will stand with, that this is simply what a person does, and my son has been doing it ever since, in the schoolyard and after to this very day, going quietly to the edge of every circle to find the child outside it. He does not know he learned it. He thinks he was always like that. I have never told him otherwise. Let him think it is his own. In a way now it is. We went back to the lantern garden the next summer, and the summer after, and every summer while Tomik was small. And every year I would find the guard at the foot of the steps. Not always the same man, they changed the men, I learned to tell. And every year I would look for the one who had knelt to my son, and 3 times in those years I found him, the same scarred hand, the same still face, and each time I stood across the court and looked at him for a while, and he did not look back, because he was at his post, and that was right. I never spoke to him. I thought about it. I had a speech in 2 languages. But I came to understand that to thank him would be to make him into a man who had done a kindness, and he did not want to be that. He wanted to be a post that the small could play safe before, and the truest thanks I could give him was to leave him his stillness and to raise my son to pass the thing along. So I will say it here instead to you, since I will never say it to him. I do not know your name, soldier. You said my son's name and never gave me yours. I do not know what country your own grandmother sang in, or how you came to know the soft way to say a foreign child's name, or what it cost you in your own small boyhood to learn that a child left standing alone is the loneliest thing under heaven. But you knew it. You knew it in your bones. And when the moment came, you knew it well enough to leave the one place you were sworn never to leave and walk down a lane of 200 children to take the hand of the one child no one in all that bright country would stand with. You did not save him from a fire or a flood. You saved him from something quieter, and I think worse, from learning, at 7, that he was a thing the world would close over and leave no mark. You broke that. You broke it with a knee and a bare hand and a name said right, and the crowd you stood before broke it the rest of the way, because that is what a crowd will do, it turns out, when one disciplined man shows it how. It does not take much. It takes one. It takes one who will go first. My son is grown now. He stands very straight. He has a way of going still, sometimes, when he is thinking. That is not from me and not from his father, and when I see it I know where it is from, though he does not. He went into a kind of service himself, in the end not soldiering, a gentler kind, the kind where you sit with people the world has closed over and you do not let it. And when people ask him why, he does not have an answer that satisfies them, and I have never offered him the true one, because the true one is a scarlet coat and a summer evening and a hand held out palm up to a frightened foreign boy, and that is not a thing you can put in an application. But I know I was there. I saw the whole of it, from the shoulders climbing up toward the ears to the wet, shining face singing the wrong words at the top of his voice. And I will tell you the one thing I learned that day, and have never unlearned. The thing I would carve on a stone if I could, in both my tongues so that no child in any country would be left out of it. The cruelest thing is not the blow. It is the circle that closes and leaves no mark. And the bravest thing is not the strike that answers a blow. It is the still man who steps down off his post in front of everyone and goes first, who takes before all the watching world the hand that no one will take and stands, where it costs him, with the child no one would stand with, so that all the rest, ashamed and freed at once, can run up and stand with him too. He went first, that is all he did, he just went first. It was enough. It is always, I have come to believe, enough.